All right, we're on to multiple choice, and this is a great form of test item because it's really versatile. We can measure a lot of different types of objectives and levels in Bloom's taxonomy with them, but they are pretty difficult to construct well. So we're going to take some time to go through these and really explore some of the things that we need to know about them. So first of all, of course, we need to think about the instructions. What do we need to tell the students in advance to kind of help them be calm and comfortable with what they're supposed to be doing? So first of all, we need our verb. Are we going to have them circle the letter next to the correct answer? Are we going to have them fill in a bubble on a Scantron sheet? Are we going to have them write the letter of the answer on a separate sheet of paper? What are we having them do? So that's the first consideration in your instructions. In this case, I'm going to say circle the letter of the. Now, do we want them to circle the letter of the correct answer, of the best answer? How do we want them to respond here? So generally in testing, we do recommend that you say of the best answer because that does encourage students to think critically. You'll have noticed perhaps if you're in my educational psychology class that sometimes there are two answers that could be right, but one of them's better. And that's kind of what we're going for actually, because your students that know the content really well will be able to pick out that distinction. The students who are struggling with the content a little bit will struggle with that distinction, and so you'll be able to tell. So in testing, we generally say that you should have them circle the letter or indicate the best, and you could capitalize that and you could italicize that. But remember that these are guidelines that I'm giving you. And so if you feel like that's not appropriate to do with your 7th graders or with the particular content that you're using, for example, is there a best answer when they're solving a math problem? Generally, there's a correct answer. So, kind of think about your content, think about your students' developmental levels, etc. But you do need to say how they're indicating their response and which type of response, whether it's best or correct or whatever, they should be looking for. Now you could also say, for example, maybe you have several answers that are correct, and I'll show you an example of this in a little bit. You could say of all correct answers. It gets a little messy, and you might have to do this question by question. You could say circle all that apply, that kind of thing. But again, I'll show you an example in a little bit. So circle the letter of the best answer for each of the following questions. Okay. You could also, of course, list the question numbers that they're supposed to be answering that are part of the multiple choice. All right, is that all we need? We're circling the letter. It's the best answer that they're looking for, which questions. You could also then say the point values on the questions if you so choose. All right, so then we go into the actual construction of the items. The question itself is called a stem. The answers are called distractors or the correct answer. So let's start with our first question. Now a lot of multiple choice questions are very low level. I'm going to show you an example of this. Which of the following theorists is most closely associated with the term pre-operational? Okay. And then I would have, oh darn the auto formatting. Then I could have Vygotsky, Erickson, Kohlberg, or Piaget. So a lot of questions are like this, very kind of definition or, remember level. But that's a very inefficient way to use multiple choice questions. It's really kind of pointless. I could do this so much more efficiently using a matching exercise. Put in all the terms like pre-operational that I want them to match with the theorist. I can bang out a bunch of them, 10 of them, really quickly, rather than having to use this format for every single question. So using multiple choice for definitions and kind of basically matching exercises is really inefficient, and I recommend that you don't do it. So if you're not supposed to use multiple choice questions for low-level objectives, like remember level objectives, what should you use them for and what should they look like? Well, again, we should be pushing them up higher in Bloom's taxonomy. So let's get rid of this crummy question here. And actually, I could keep these distractors and correct answers here and say something more like this. Mrs. Bates encourages her students to figure out math concepts on their own using manipulatives. They are allowed to, or encouraged perhaps, to discuss what they find with their peers and to make comparisons between what they find and what they have learned before. Which theorist would most likely approve of Mrs. Bates' teaching methods? So what we've done here is given the students a novel scenario, something new, preferably something not too far outside of what they've seen before or done before in class or talked about in class, because we don't want to take them outside of their zone of proximal development. But we can push them up just a little bit within our testing. And this situation that's new requires the students to read through it and then analyze, okay, what is going on in this situation? And then what do I know about these theorists that matches? Okay, so it really is kind of a complex higher order question, and that's what I'm going to encourage you to use multiple choice questions for, to get students to think, to explore, to access and activate their prior knowledge, and then to analyze and apply and evaluate and all of those good higher order thinking skills. So think about within your content, how could you do that? Now, we also want to make sure that all of your distractors, those are the wrong answers, are believable or plausible, okay? So we don't want to put in here something like Homer Simpson. It's funny, yes, but it is something else that our students have to read. It's kind of distracting, and we're also introducing some bias issues when we do things like this, because there may be a student in our class who's an English language learner, or who doesn't watch television, or who simply is not familiar with this particular character, and when they see Homer Simpson, they may be thinking, oh shoot, is that a theorist that I just don't remember? Maybe that's right. And so they get confused and it becomes a bias issue because we've put in something that's culturally based as a funny, quote unquote, answer. So, whereas it can be fun to throw in something kind of silly, especially something maybe we've referenced in class so that every student is aware of it, occasionally in a test, we don't want to do it very often. We really want to stick with options that are all believable, so that we're really determining what students know and don't know about content, rather than kind of biasing our tests with these, culturally biased or linguistic issues. Okay, so now let's take a look at another type of question within this multiple choice genre, if you will. And you've seen a lot of these over the course of your educational career, so let's take a look. Which of the following strategies is not recommended by modern constructivists? Question mark. Always ending with a question mark, right? Okay, so let's see. We could do problem-based learning, operant conditioning, C, jigsaw, D, WebQuest. All right, so you've seen a lot of these questions before, and I'm going to tell you right now, having not in your question is a big no-no. For one reason, a lot of kids miss that not. that's in there. And so it's not a reliable measure of what my students do and don't know. It's simply measuring, can they read that there's the word not in there, and that's not quite fair, really. That can be a cultural bias issue as well, especially for English language learners who are already struggling to read the questions. And then we put in negatively worded items like this. So it's really not fair to do that. We're going to try and get rid of those as much as possible. You also see a lot of these. All of the above. And that would be super confusing, right? Which of the following strategies is not recommended? All of the... wait, not... Do you see how the language would get so confusing here? Which of the following is not recommended? All of the above are not recommended? Is that what you're asking? Even worse when you say none of the above. So none of the above strategies are not recommended? Wow, that's confusing. Generally with testing, we recommend that you do not ever use all of the above, none of the above, or negatively worded items. Okay, so what we would do here instead, if you want to do this type of question, we do what's called an alternative response. Which of the following strategies are recommended by modern constructivists? Circle all that apply. So I was mentioning that we would get to this type of question as we were doing the instructions up here. So in this case, what they would do is circle A, C, and D, and they would just leave out B. And I could even put in some more here if I wanted to. So I could say, for example, shaping. Okay, so that's a behaviorist technique, and we wouldn't circle that. This is a much more effective item because now I can see exactly what my students do and do not understand. They know problem-based learning is, they know Jigsaw is, but maybe they didn't know WebQuest was a strategy, so they didn't circle it. So I can actually see that and know what my students know and don't know. Okay? So this is a really big lesson to learn. Please don't use negatively worded items. Please don't use all of the above. Please don't use none of the above. The final thing I want you to notice with regard to multiple choice questions is that you'll notice that I only have one thing in each of these distractors or correct answers. I could write a question that has something like, which of the following terms, and this is a low level one so we wouldn't use it anyways, is most closely associated with Erickson. And I could do A, trust, let's see, I could even do R. Trust, initiative, and pre-operational. I could do identity, intimacy, and industry. Okay, do you see what I'm going with? I've got multiple things in here. And then we've got students hung up on, oh wait, there's one in here that's not, and it becomes this whole mental gymnastics thing where students are doing somersaults and twists and turns in their brains trying to figure out which one of these combinations is right. Try to avoid having combinations within your answer options. Keep things simple. This question up here, number 1, is not a simple question, but if they know the content, they can answer it. And that's what I want out of my multiple question, or my multiple choice, high-level questions that students can answer easily if they know it.